privilege and honor to introduce Senator Roger Marshall.
Thank you so much. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much. The bad news is I've about lost my voice. The good news is that means my speech will be even shorter than usual. And honestly, I hope my voice makes it through this, and I hope that I'm able to answer some of your questions as well. It is great to be back here. I got to tell you, this is one of the toughest groups to face because I know I have to know my stuff, right? That I'm not going to be able to shoot you baloney, and that's good. That's good to hold your public officials accountable. You know, probably every day I get asked what my priorities are. And I think that's what I want to start with this afternoon, is share with you what my priorities are. As I hear other members of Congress speak, when they're asked their priorities, they're going to shout out some legislative priorities. And I think sometimes we miss the big picture, that my priorities are always people, that my priorities are hardworking men and women across America. My priorities are small businessmen and women that make most of the jobs in this community. My priorities are senior citizens and young children. My priorities are young families out there trying to live this American dream that I've got to live. My priorities are veterans. My priorities are those men and women in the military. It's not the military, it's my priority. It's the men and women in the military that are my priorities. As I think of the military and the men and women in the military, that kind of takes me probably to my first policy issue. And my number one job, I think, as a senator, is to keep you and your families safe and secure. Who in this room feels safer today than the day Joe Biden was sworn in? Okay. Who in this room thinks that America is in a better position to protect us from foreign foes than we were the day Joe Biden was sworn in? As I think about my oath, my priorities, I think about the oath I took to be sworn into office. And the people in this room have read the Constitution, they've taken their government class, and they know that I don't take an oath to a person. I don't take an oath to a president. I don't take an oath to a leader in the Senate, anything like that. I've taken 3 oaths in my life, and I take that very seriously. The Bible says, let your yes be your yes, your no be your no. Don't be taking, oaths. But I've done it 3 times. This July 30th will be the 40th anniversary of my wife and my marriage, so I took an oath to marry her. And she's given me 4 wonderful children. We have 4 wonderful grandchildren, and that looks like there's opportunity for more. And when people ask me, why are you doing this job, there's other things I could be doing that would be funner, maybe not more fulfilling, but certainly funner. And certainly as I see those grandkids every day or every week, that they remind me. When I ran for this office, for the Congress the first time, my grandson was born, and he had $30,000 was his share of the national debt. Today it's $100,000. So we're going in the wrong direction, and we'll probably talk more about that. So oath to my wife, and then joined the military. Took an oath as well, and I speak about veterans and why this military is so important to me. My dad served in the National Guard here out at McConnell. My brother in the Air Force. 2 of my great uncles were part of storming the beaches of Normandy on D-Day. Now I have a son in the Army. So certainly I'm committed to those people. The oath that I took, as you all know, was to the Constitution, right? It's to the Constitution. I now have a Constitution, in my office, on the desk. We didn't study the Constitution in medical school, so I have to actually go back and look it up and read it and say, well, what does it say? And I think it's a great thing to carry with you. But I took an oath to defend this country, to defend the Constitution, to defend the values that you and I were raised on from enemies, both domestic and foreign. So I think what I want to share with you, what I feel are our biggest threats to your security. I think the biggest, most immediate threat to your safety and security is our southern border. The most immediate threat. You know why do I say that? Every day in America, 300 people die from fentanyl poisoning. 300. It's an airplane crashing every day in America, and our president turns his back and won't even acknowledge that there's a problem. He won't take responsibility. You know what President Eisenhower said? One of my heroes is that leadership is nothing more than taking accountability. When's the last time you heard someone in Washington say, it's my fault? I'm taking responsibility for this. I've made some bad decisions, not good decisions, and I'll take responsibility and try to move on as well. But it's certainly, as we think about the southern border, what's that mean to Kansas? 1 or 2, probably 3 or 4 Kansans are dying every day from fentanyl poisoning. We're using Narcan 10 to 12 times a day in the state of Kansas. 10 to 12 times, or otherwise we'd have 10 or 12 more deaths. So for 2 years, I've been trying to get Narcan in every school, trying to make sure that our EMS officers have Narcan. If you don't have Narcan in your children and your grandchildren's schools, please help me to try to get it there. There's not federal funding for it, but so far we've always been able to find some public nonprofit to help us get it into the schools. But I think the fentanyl poisoning alone is reason enough to understand that we don't have control of our southern border and why that's our most immediate national security threat. Let me take a drink of tea here to get my voice warmed up. As I think about our biggest long-term national threat, I don't think it's Russia. I don't think it's China. I don't think it's North Korea. I don't think it's Iran. I think our biggest national security threat is our national debt. $31 trillion and growing. We paid $475 billion last year in interest. Folks, this is unsustainable. Now, in a couple months, we're going to have a debt limit crisis. And the national media is going to tell you the sky is falling, the world's coming an end, if we don't do something with that debt limit. But let me explain what I think the debt limit is like. I think the debt limit, to put it in your world terms, if you gave your 21-year-old child, a 19-year-old child, a credit card and they maxed it, and they came to you and said, Mom and Dad, I need a new credit card, that one's maxed. What would be the advice you would give that child? Get a job, stop spending. And I think that's the same advice I'm giving our president. I don't want to give you another credit card until you show me that you're interested in balancing our budget. That we can do that. If we would cut spending by $100 or $200 billion next year, freeze spending, in 6 or 7 years, we would get to a balanced budget. Isn't that amazing? I don't want to underestimate or anybody walk out of here saying, gosh, Senator Marshall is not concerned about our foreign foes. I am. I respect them. I'm not afraid of any of them, though. I respect every one of them. My take on all of this is that Russia wants to have power over all the world. China wants to own the world. North Korea and Iran want to blow up the world. That's my take on it, that China would like to own the world. Certainly they're our biggest long-term national threat. Certainly this fentanyl issue can be traced back to China, that this is China's revenge for the opium war that destroyed their country. I get that. Absolutely get that. I respect China, but I wouldn't trade hands. Anybody. I wouldn't trade any country the hand that's been dealt us. But we have to take care of business. We have to control the things that we can control. We have to control the education that our children get. This country is known for its innovation, for its hard work. As long as we reward innovation and hard work, that we promote education, we're going to be just fine. China does a great job of copying what we do, but they don't have what we have. Do you realize we could shut down 90% of China's energy in a heartbeat? That if we have the ability to shut down the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea with the snap of the president's finger, and China would not have 90% of their energy comes in from that region. Could you imagine living in a world in the United States and the state of Kansas where 90% of our energy that we were dependent upon Iran or Mexico or somebody else? We just have no concept of what that would be like. China can't feed themselves. They're totally dependent upon us for food. We take food so much for granted in this country. And I just got to stop and talk about the Farm Bill just for a second. You would be shocked to know how much a Farm Bill would impact the city of Wichita, Sedgwick County. Every 5 years we write a Farm Bill. Since 1933, I believe. Every 5 years, this is the year. What a Farm Bill has done is allow Americans to purchase groceries for about half of what the rest of the developed world does. About half. What the Farm Bill does is allow a farmer who got held out this summer or has a drought, it allows them to plant next year's crop. Nobody gets rich off of it. Every farmer would much rather have a good crop and sell it than have to take the crop insurance payment. But what it does is allow them to plant next year's crop, so we have a relatively steady supply of wheat, so we have bread in our stores. It is just that simple. Now, by the way, a Farm Bill is about 80, this year it's probably 90% for nutrition programs. When I did my first Farm Bill in 2016, we had budgeted probably $70 billion a year for the nutrition programs, for SNAP dollars, for food stamps, for school lunches, for WIC, all great things. But this year we're going to probably spend $130 billion instead. So we budgeted 70, 80, we're going to spend 130. Well, how come? Well, just like your groceries are probably up 20 or 25% since Joe Biden became president, the SNAP budget has grown 25 or 30% as well. You know, it is just that simple. I want to go back to the national debt for a second, and then I'll try to open it up for questions. I got to come here with solutions. What's the solution to the national debt issue? Certainly, when in the previous administration we rolled back taxes, we rolled back regulations, the economy grew, and we have record amounts of money coming into the coffers of the federal government. Record numbers. We decreased taxes, but the economy grew and our revenue came in. So any business is upside down. That's the first thing you try to do is maximize the income coming into a business. I'm telling you, folks, we don't need a rocket science plan. We just need a good plan executed very well. This is not rocket science. So you increase the income just like you do at a business that's upside down. What we need to do is actually decrease taxes and roll back regulations, and this president is doing just the opposite. If you saw his budget yesterday, you would probably need some Finnegan, something for nausea. With over 30 tax increases, $4.7 trillion of new taxes, raising corporate taxes from 21 to 28%. And what's that going to do to inflation? What do corporations do? They just pass that tax down to consumers, right? So this is a tax on everybody. The president breaking another one of his promises that he wouldn't tax people under, what was his magic number, $400,000 a year. But that's a tax on everybody. Capital gains going up to 40, 50%. Why would a person that runs a business reinvest if they're going to pay 40 or 50% if they take those capital gains as well? So anyway, the first step of balancing budget is to increase the income. But we don't have a taxing problem. We don't have an income problem. We have a spending problem, folks. We have a spending problem. I believe from the time I was sworn in that first time in 2017, actually, I think we went from 4.5 to now the president's proposing an almost $7 trillion budget. I mean, it's just unsustainable that $475 billion of interest this year is going to turn into $1 trillion of interest before you know it as well. So that part of it is unsustainable. This country has to go on a diet. I don't mean a seafood diet where you see food and eat it. It's appropriation season in Washington, D.C. Every day, I'll see 20 or 30 groups, my staff and I, and not one of them has said, the federal government's giving us enough money. Every one of them comes in and says, we want more money. And it's, by the way, this $2 billion, that's just a decimal placeholder in the federal government. But it's not, folks. $2 billion is still $2 billion. Amen. So somehow, some way, we have to get control of this budget and get control of the spending. And that's why you're going to see this summer a handful of us Republicans willing to die on the sword of this national debt ceiling. And there won't be many of us, but this is the only leverage we have when you're in the minority. You know, the American people gave the Democrats control of the Senate and the White House. I didn't give them control, but that's the way it is. So the only leverage I have is this debt ceiling, and it's really the only leverage that Kevin McCarthy has on the House side with the president. That if you won't negotiate a budget with us, sit down and have a serious discussion with the budget, and certainly the budget the president gave us yesterday is not a serious budget. Again, it's completely unsustainable. So that's going to be the leverage, that's going to be the sword that I'm going to die on. And I need your help. I need your help out there telling people, why is Senator Marshall willing to blow through this debt ceiling? Is it going to hurt our credit rating? You know, I don't know. There's people in here a lot smarter than I am when it comes to finances across this country. It might. I think it will. I think that the treasurer has so many more things that she could do, paying off the debt and prioritizing that with the monies that are coming in. But the press is going to blow it out of proportion and say, oh my gosh, Senator Marshall is jeopardizing the finances of this country. But I'll make this final point and I'll open it up. It would be much easier for me to push this issue to my grandchildren, right? That's the easy thing to do. Leadership is doing the right thing when it's not popular. I'm willing to have this fight today because I think it's my responsibility that my generation has allowed the last 4 or 5 presidents to just double, quadruple our national debt. So it's time for me to take responsibility. And I'm willing to stand up and have a discussion about how we get control of our spending. I'm willing to have that fight today so that my grandchildren might be able to live the same American dream that every one of us in this room have got to do. This is still the greatest country in the world. Don't let people fool you. The greatest country in the world. We've got our challenges, we've got our problems, but we can solve them ourselves if we just look in the mirror. Just all over the state of Kansas, I see solutions of people that want to solve their problems. I think that's a good place to stop. I'll do my best to answer questions. And having been here before and done a town hall or two, no one came here to hear a 20-minute sermon from anybody. I hope that I'll try to give short answers if you'll give a short question.
Just follow the mic.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Personally, I'd like to say that I hope at least 99 and 44% of those 5,000 children you delivered to the Republic.
I hope so too. Thank you.
What is your feelings toward China after having lived through the rape of Nanking by the Japanese in World War II? They're doing the same thing to their own people right now today. What kind of feedback do you have on that?
Again, I think that China certainly has multiple human rights abuses. One of the guys I ran track with at Butler County Community College did 20 years of mission work over there, and has certainly alerted me to many of the human rights issues. I'm absolutely concerned about them. We are so economically entwined with them, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough coming out of this relationship. I think this is why our president is unwilling to get tough on them as well. But and unfortunately, it's not isolated. There's certainly concerned about it. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes, Senator, I agree with you most all the time. But I found an issue that I disagree with you with.
Darn it.
You and Senator Moran are teaming up with socialist Elizabeth Warren and Chris Murphy to sponsor Bill 653 to lift the embargo on Cuba.
Okay.
Now, Senator Marco Rubio says lifting the embargo on Cuba will only bolster the communist government. And most of the Cuban immigrants that have immigrated to Miami, Florida, are all opposed to lifting the embargo. Now, I understand you're from Kansas and you want to help the Kansas farmers. But how will you help the Kansas farmers when Cuba is broke? And how are they going to pay for all this Kansas grain that you're going to send them. Are you going to allow credit for Cuba?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and that's the great thing about America is we can, debate this issue. I don't think it's black or white. I've been to Cuba twice. My question for you is, well, using your standard, we should stop selling anything to China as well, right? For whatever the reasons are, you don't want to sell wheat to Cuba. We should stop selling wheat and cattle to China as well. So I think that we've tried it both ways. We've tried it with the embargo, without the embargo, and nothing seems to move. I just see no reason to punish my Kansas farmers. And as far as the credit to Cuba, certainly it's not my responsibility. As a federal government, I don't want to give them credit, but I would like to allow banks in America, if they so chose to give them that credit. I appreciate it's a tough one, absolutely tough. And certainly when you live in Florida, that voice of those folks that had their property stolen from them, and this regime in place, I totally understand the hatred that they have towards that regime. It's a good question, though. It's not black or white.
Senator Marshall, in the past you've indicated support for the belief in the need for an Article 5 Convention of States. Do you believe that the federal congressional role for calling for the Convention of States according to Article 5 has anything to do with setting the rules and procedures of the convention itself?
Gosh, I'm going to need a lawyer for this one. I don't have an answer for you. I'm the first to say that I need a consultation on this. I wasn't aware of any really federal role. To me, the power and control should be at the state level, and it takes 2/3 of the state, and then the state house just like 60 to, they didn't have quite enough, 60 to 40 or 60 to 50 was the vote count or something. So, but I'm willing to be educated.
Only when it says the Congress shall call, shall call. There's the
Yeah. I'm going to text Mike Lee right now. He's my constitutional expert. He texted me twice today about another. So I'm not going to shoot from the hip and say I understand that. So I'll have to look into it. Thank you.
Yeah, Senator Marshall, a question on the medical area. Are you aware of any current plans or actions in terms of looking at Dr. Fauci and his group of people that, in terms of all their wrongdoing that's occurred in the last 3 years on a national basis?
Sure.
Policies?
You bet. To me, the focus should not be on Dr. Fauci. It should be on the policies. And certainly Dr. Fauci controlled a lot of those policies. So the answer is yes. I hope that you're following us, our newsletter, look on our website. We've had 2 or 3 pretty major pieces of information thrown out. We're going to be on CBS News like Monday night with a special that we've done in regards to this. The House is investigating it. Rand Paul and I are on a subcommittee that are investigating it as well. And I think, and we're going to keep leaking out the information that we can as they unclassify it. But I would just share this with you for starters. I think if I had a jury in front of me that there's a body of evidence that would show that this virus more than likely, most likely, came from a lab in Wuhan, China. That the first smoking gun is it's been 3 years and they don't have an intermediate animal host. So these viruses don't jump from the animal to a human. They don't jump from a bat to the human. There has to be some type of an intermediate host. In the case of SARS and MERS, it was a civet and a camel. It took them 5 or 8 months to find that animal. So that's the first smoking gun. China could have easily disproved this if and they've tried to, but they can't find that intermediate host. Second smoking gun, September of 2019, Dr. Shi, the bat lady, took down her DNA lab in Wuhan, China, that was full of data paid for with American tax dollars. So we've been financing this gain of function research for years via EcoHealth. So all they would have to do is open up that data bank and show us that there's no grandfather or cousin of COVID-19 in there. But the problem is that it is in there, and if they showed us that, we would find it. And by the way, EcoHealth has broken the law, and that's why there's a Inspector General case looking into all this. They broke the law by not keeping track of that data that should have been shared with Americans. Third smoking gun is the way viruses work, and I hate to get too deep, but you need to at least understand a little bit that there's some science behind this. The third smoking gun is a virus just doesn't come on the scene like COVID did without some progenitors that out there that should have been in the public, that we should have easily been able to retrospectively go back and find some of these other viruses as it mutated to become selective to humans rather than selective to bats. So this virus sticks to glue to human lung cells, but not to bat cells, and that's smoking gun number 3. Is in 2014, Dr. Ralph Barrick, University of North Carolina, is doing research with Dr. Shi. They figure out how to take an original SARS-CoV virus, and put a protein spike on it that sticks like glue to human lung cells. They developed a special mouse and gave it the same type of receptors on the lung cells, just like human lung cells. So, what are the chances in nature of being able to find this perfect protein spike that sticks to human cells, but not from bats at all if it came from a bat? So that's the third smoking gun. The fourth smoking gun is the furin cleavage site. And this is, Dr. Fauci loves to talk and never answer the question. But the furin cleavage site is what allows this virus to dump its guts into your lung cells. So there's a S1, S2 particle on the virus, and you have to cleave that spot for the S2 to dump its machinery into your lung cells. And human lung cells have the perfect mechanism to do that. They talk about this double arginine site. It's just too perfect. A perfect 12 nucleotide genetic sequence inserted into this original SARS virus to do this. I'm telling you, people, it just doesn't occur in nature that way. So those are several of the smoking guns out there. I think you put them all together, we can see that there's this massive, huge cover-up going on right now with it. That all the people that wrote the original articles in the Lancet and the Nature Medicine, every one of them was funded by Fauci to the tune of tens, hundreds of millions of dollars as well. To me, again, the focus is not on Dr. Fauci. To me, the focus should turn to our incestuous process by which we give out grants. Research grants. So we've spent billions, tens of billions of dollars on this gain of function research, and all it's done is killed over 10 million people. No benefit from it. Meanwhile, Alzheimer's, who doesn't know somebody infected with Alzheimer's is just destroying this nation. We spent $350 billion last year on Alzheimer's. If you want me to balance Medicare, if you got a way to save Medicare, I have to figure out a way. I need a miracle drug to help with Alzheimer's. It's that simple. I need innovation. So I think what I've discovered is this just huge spider web of people where I've followed the money with Dr. Fauci in the middle of this, controlling probably hundreds of billions of dollars. So not only is Dr. Fauci funding gain of function research, this is the news that we broke 2 days ago, and will be part of this CBS news story on Monday, is just how the Department of Defense, the State Department, 10 agencies have been funding EcoHealth. 10 agencies have funded EcoHealth to the tune of $122 million over the past 15 years. They're double dipping. They're just all sorts of things going on that are not right. Why is USAID? That's United States Agency for International Development. Typically, we're helping get food to kids going to schools, right? Why are they funding EcoHealth, which is funding the Wuhan Institute of Virology, with scientists that work for the Chinese military? They're outside their lane. We've got to get control of that. I want to bring those research dollars back to healthcare where we can make a difference. That's a long answer, but obviously this is something near and dear to my heart.
Senator Marshall, thanks again for being here.
There you are.
The last time I asked you about replacing Mitch McConnell,
Yeah.
well, I think it's more evident with him and 18 Republicans voting for the unfunded bill out of the House, a lame duck House, and they got it through the Senate when in 2 weeks they would have been able to have the House refigure that budget. How can you still support Mitch McConnell?
Yep. He's the coach. I'm a team player. He's going to be the leader for the foreseeable future. even if I don't like the coach at K-State, I'm going to support him. I think that's my job to support him. And I do like the coach at K-State, for the record. All coaches. So. I'm just saying that I'm a team guy. That's the way I was raised. Leader McConnell gives me the opportunity to disagree with him. Ukraine's a great example that we are having fervent conversations behind closed doors about Ukraine and the funding for Ukraine. But I hear you loud and clear what you're talking about there. And by the way, he's doing okay. Indeed, he did fall, trip, and bump his head. He had a pretty nasty concussion. They kept him awake for 36, 48 hours. But seems to, other than being a little grouchy, he's doing just fine. It'll be okay. Elena, my wife, talked to his wife Elaine yesterday, and he's recovering nicely. But thanks for asking. You with that?
So being a doctor, you come from a non-traditional background into politics and Congress in general. I'm a current student at WSU pursuing an engineering degree with the intention of taking my technical experience into politics. I also serve as the president of our Turning Point USA chapter and noticed that the vast majority of our members are engineering, STEM, pre-med students, but they also want to be involved politically. What advice do you have for students and young professionals who have these quote-unquote non-traditional backgrounds and wanting to get involved politically?
Yep, great question. Get involved in the campaign. So Katie Sawyer is here. She's my state director. I met Katie Sawyer at a fundraiser that someone else was throwing for me in McPherson, Kansas. She was 12 months pregnant, and she was running around doing everything. I mean, she had the food, she had the guest list, she was just volunteering. And I asked her, Katie, what's your mission? And she said, I want to give agriculture a megaphone. And I said, Katie, come work for me and I'll give you a big megaphone. So I think that, everyone's my friend now. But the people I'm loyal to are the friends that didn't, when I was running in a primary, those are my friends now. My loyal friends. Loyalty is in such short supply in D.C. So I think get involved at the grassroots level sooner than later. Stop by my office here on the corner of Market and Douglas. Get to know those people. What's going on? What's going on there? So get to know the Congressman Estes' staff. What's going on there? Stop by his office and get to know those people. What are the issues? But it's like all life. It takes time and effort and energy.
Doctor, we're reading the paper and hearing on TV that Iran has raised their level.
Richmond, 90% plus, right?
Very, very close. And I would like you to comment on that. And also, the current administration, did President Biden still keep all of the sanctions on Iran that President Trump has put on them?
Okay, great. So I wouldn't trust Iran any further than I can throw them. And among other problems, if Iran gets nukes, then every other country wants nukes down there as well. So they'll go buy the technology and do it. So it's quite a domino. I certainly believe if Iran goes ahead and develops it any further, that Israel will attack them. I think the United States should do everything within our power to prevent it from happening. Whatever sanctions are left are not working. China is circumventing them one way or the other, getting oil out of Iran, putting it in other unmarked or differently marked cargo ships as well. Just frankly, sanctions have been a little bit frustrating as far as trying to apply them. I don't think we're doing maximal pressure with sanctions in Ukraine either. We're only applying 50% of the bank sanctions that we could to Russia right now. And that's one of the reasons the ruble is stable. And their economy is stable as well. So sanctions aren't working. I'm pretty sure that they took a lot of the sanctions off when we made a switch in the White House. Yes, sir.
My name is Gary Park. I'm the author of the history, Learjet history,
Okay.
beginnings, innovations, utilizations. I'm also a retired FAA. And one of the things I'll tell you in the book is that after the Learjet was certified, the FAA was reorganized. It has virtually not changed since that time. And now we have this big disaster with the MAX.
Right.
And I will tell you, I was working at the FAA when all the decisions were made to initiate self-certification. All that happened under our watch, and we knew at the time that that was going to be a problem. And it proved out to be. And what I've been seeing is that the government has been spending lots of money and effort in areas where they have no business, and an area where they really belong is the FAA.
Ask a question.
Sure. So my point is, Congress is responsible for the whole situation.
Of course. So I appreciate the issue. So FAA is up for reauthorization this year. It's one of the big items on the to-do list. Again, it's not an area that I claim to have a lot of expertise at, but I certainly appreciate the comments and certainly had the same concerns that you do. So we'll take a look at it. I appreciate it. Coach?
The McCarran-Ferguson Act basically said that health insurance rested with states in determining what should be done and not done. And of course, Obamacare came into being and said, we're going to take over from the federal government what it's going to do. Is there any kind of movement going on to try and return healthcare to the states in terms of determining what you're going to do and what you can't do?
Right. So, Coach, I appreciate the question. So, Coach Powell was my one of my high school football coaches. He's looking great. Appreciate those people. You know, part of my people always say, "What can you do for me?" And please, we need to encourage young men and women, godly men and women, people with values to go back into teaching and coaching. Run for school board, all those types of things. I can only keep so much bad policy, but Coach, no, there's nothing. It's just the opposite. Believe it or not, Bernie and Sanders and I have a growing relationship. We've been able to sit down. He's actually very bright, and he's very thoughtful. And oftentimes we'll agree on the same goals, but where we disagree is, of course, how to get there. So his solution is always more government, and my solution is always more innovation. You know, take prescription drugs. I think it's a great. So no, Coach, there's nothing. It's not on. We're trying to fight the cost of gasoline, the cost of groceries, trying to secure the board. There's no time left to get to a healthcare policy. Healthcare policy is just set on the shelves the last three years or so. I think it's very very evident what's going on with that as well. So prescription drugs. Let's talk about that. This is my last one. So prescription drugs. If we cut the prescription drug prices in half, how much of an impact would that have on the health care? None. Prescription drugs only make about 7% of the pot of money that's going into health care right now. 7%. What would be the value of, what would you pay for a drug that cured you from hepatitis, that cured your lymphoma? You know, what are those worth? Well, it's not for me to decide, but Bernie Sanders wants to decide what those drugs are worth. And what he's going to do is kill innovation. That's what's going to happen. The next the Alzheimer's drug that would solve Alzheimer's, it's going to be in a lab somewhere and die a very slow death, and we'll never see it. The big problem with prescription drugs is the out-of-pocket costs that we're paying. That's why people are concerned about it. For some reason, folks don't care. Well, they do care what their insurance cost is, but their employer's paying most of it. What is happening is people are concerned about their out-of-pocket costs. And this is where Bernie and I agree that something called a pharmacy benefit manager is controlling that market and taking a big chunk of that pie out of the equation and really brings no value to it. So he and I working together, maybe one of the most liberal people, one of the most conservative people in the Senate can get together and solve this. There's a lot of room in between. So thank you. We good?
Just another one,
Oh,
maybe.
one more.
Microphone went dead, sorry guys.
That's all right.
Dr. Martin, I hope you know me.
I do, Dr. Reddy. Good to see you again.
I use person Hill City. I got two questions. One question is about reimbursement by Medicare.
Yep.
My understanding is that Medicare is reimbursing the doctors less, 10% less. In fact, some doctors want to join early because the reimbursement is less.
Yep.
What can you do to make it to go up so the doctor won't retire because
Right.
of lack of sufficient reimbursement? The second question is, you know about these new drugs for cancer treatment. Lung cancer, there is a new drug that came to the market. My understanding is that this drug costs $17,000 per month. 17,000. Who can afford to pay that much for treating lung cancer?
Right.
Thank you.
So talk about the physician reimbursement, first of all. So physicians have had their reimbursement decreased by Medicare, I think, every year that I've been in Congress. But without Congressman Estes and our office, it would have been worse. I can tell you that. That Congressman Estes on the House Ways and Means Committee, and then our office working in the House and now in the Senate have slowed down that cut of reimbursement. The problem is that Medicare is on its way to becoming insolvent in 2028. And and unfortunately, there's a lot of people in Washington that think if they just keep cutting physicians' fees, that'll solve the problem. And again, when I have this discussion, I go back to people and ask them the question: in the pie of healthcare, how much are physicians taking home? I mean, what would you guess in the room? Most people guess 50%, 50. But actually, the physicians take home about 7%. They may probably get 14% of the pie. Half of that goes to pay our nurses, the overhead. So doctors are actually taking home about 7% of the pie as well. This is the reward for doctors who were on the front lines through all of COVID. It just shows who the priorities are for this White House and for the people that control the Senate and control the House, that doctors are not their priority as well. And the cost of prescription drugs, there's not a simple solution. But what is the value of that medicine? $17,000 a month to cure cancer, lung cancer. Gosh. And of course, that's going to be spread among everybody in Medicare, spread among everybody in your particular insurance policy as well. I understand it's a lot of money. But a lot of these drugs keep people out of the hospital that save money and allow people to stay in the workforce. So I hear you loud and clear. But we have the greatest health care in the world, and it's overly expensive. There's a lot of wasted money, and I would love to be able to solve that problem. I believe that we're going to solve it, though, by more transparency, by allowing innovation, and allowing patients to be consumers again. That's how we solve the cost of health care. There's so many people that are taking a bite out of that apple that never see a patient, that never take care of a patient, that's driving up the cost of healthcare, including the prescription drugs. So, thanks everybody. Good. Thank you.